a friend. He's hired about 8 or 9 of my former students, and it's very hard to get jobs in today's market. One of the reasons he hires my students is they're good economists, the way Doug defined it. They know the long run as well as the short run, and the direct and the indirect effects, which they get from Hazlitt, Bastiat, Mises, and Rothbard, all of whom my students get. So Doug doesn't have to undermine everything they've learned. They're already in sync with his activities. But we're friends, and if friends can't disagree, and if we can't disagree, we never learn from each other, so I'm going to disagree with him somewhat. To me, it's very important, language is very important, words are very important. Indeed, we're not going to pick up any guns to promote liberty. We don't have any specialization in comparative advantage in guns. All we've got is words. And if we lose words, we've got fewer words to make our case for liberty and freedom. Our friends on the other side of the aisle, and there are 2 other sides of the aisle, the left and the right, take all sorts of words away from us. We used to have the word liberal as in classical liberal, and we no longer have it. We have to say Ms. If you don't say Ms., you're a sexist or a pig or something. You have to say he or she. You can no longer say he. Even the word libertarian is being tried to be ripped off from us, so we've got to keep all the words we can. And if we start frittering them away and losing them to our enemies, our intellectual and moral enemies, that's not good. Collectivism. Nothing wrong with collectivism if it's voluntary. Look, if you're really against collectivism, you have to be for team sports, and you have to be, if you're really against collectivism, you have to be against team sports, and you have to favor individual sports. But that's silly. I mean, track and swimming are individual sports, football and basketball are collectivist sports, so there's nothing per se wrong with collectivism. The only problem is with coercive collectivism, where you're forced into doing things. But coercive individualism is no good either. I admire Doug, one of the very few people that doesn't call what happened between 1861 and 1865 a civil war. It wasn't a civil war. Here he's taking the word for us, and I applaud him for that. Many people think it was a civil war, but a civil war like occurred in Russia in 1917 or Spain in 1936 was 2 opposing people, each of one who wanted to rule the other. But in the War of Northern Aggression, or the War to Prevent Southern Secession, the North wanted to run the whole country, but the South didn't. They just wanted to secede, so it was a war of secession. Democracy. There's nothing wrong with democracy, per se. Look, the chess club, they're trying to figure out, should we meet on Tuesday nights or Wednesday nights, and they take a vote. Fine, everyone in the chess club has agreed to be part of the club, and the club votes on this, and that's fine. The problem with democracy is not democracy per se, it's democracy when you're forced to vote, whether you don't want to be part of it. Look, you want to have socialized medicine? Go, God bless you, have socialized medicine just for the people that want to have it, and that's collectivism, that's socialism. There's nothing wrong with socialism. Well, there are 2 definitions of socialism. One is government ownership of the means of production, and that's highly problematic. But what about from each according to his ability to each according to his need, which is also socialism? That's fine, as long as it's done voluntarily. Look, the kibbutz, the monastery, the socialist collective, if all the people agree to be part of this socialist venture where they do this from each according to their ability, each according to need, that's not a problem. Politics. Look, before I get to politics, the TSA. There's nothing per se wrong with the TSA. Because of U.S. foreign policy and imperialism, our planes are under attack. Now, the way it should be done is that each airline would have its own attempt to promote safety, and they would compete on that. Now, obviously, I disagree with the TSA, a government thing, but it's not wrong per se to try to make sure that bombs don't get on planes. I mean, that's ridiculous. And there's groveling. I grovel. I tell you, when I go to that thing, I don't want to miss a flight, because then I can't be here for this speech if I miss that flight. It was just yesterday in Auburn, Alabama. Look, we're only 1/2 of 1% of the population. If we snark at them, they get us. What we got to do is make sure we got 40 or 50% of the population, and then we wouldn't have to snark at them. We could just, they would be eliminated. So the key is to get more libertarians. Now, who's getting libertarians for us? Ayn Rand, even though she was not a libertarian, got a lot of libertarians for us. And here's a picture of a guy, Ron Paul, and all Doug can say is that he's not corrupt. Come on, give me a break. There's a man, he goes to college campuses and get 15,000 kids screaming for Mises and against fractional reserve banking and against the Fed. I mean, this is a phenomenon. This man is doing more than anyone else to promote liberty. And then you've got a guy like Stefan Molyneux who gives this long lecture about how evil he is. And I only could bear to listen to it for the first 10 minutes. I got sick to my stomach and I started writing about it. He blames me only listening to 10 minutes of it. But even he says if someone talks about a unicorn, you sort of turn the page. Look, I don't mind when the bad guys attack Ron Paul. I mean, they're bad guys. They have to. When the NBC and the ABC and the New York Times and then they denigrate him, what do? They laugh at him, they ignore him, and then we win according to, what's his name, the Indian guy? But when a libertarian criticizes Ron Paul, that's despicable. He is doing more for libertarianism to promote liberty and freedom, and then people who ought to know better attack him. That really gets my dander up. Now, in my chapter 12 here, I have a more vicious attack on Stefan Molyneux. He's never replied to it, but I think he's changed his mind, I'm not sure. But that is really the lowest of the low, when our friends attack us in the back. That's not cool. Now, I had a speech prepared. According to this thing, I was supposed to speak on what is Austrian economics, what is libertarianism, and discuss their relationship. What I was going to do is do 25 minutes of Austrianism, 25 minutes of libertarianism, and then 10 minutes of the relationship between them. And what I was going to do in Austrianism, where's my Austrian notes? I was going to do why we're praxeologists, why we don't believe in empirical testing, we don't believe that physics is the model for economics, rather we're a branch of logic, and why the mainstream sees us as cultists. I was going to do a little bit about Austrian business cycle theory, the non-neutrality of money, spontaneous order, entrepreneurship, ordinal and cardinal, transitivity, antitrust, utility and welfare economics, multi-process, socialism of the bad kind, capital being heterogeneous, not homogeneous, structural production and difference. I had a list of about 15 or 16 things. And then on the libertarianism, what I was going to do, where are my libertarian notes? Here we go. I was going to say that libertarianism consists pretty much only of the non-aggression principle, which is one side of the coin, and the other side of the coin is property rights. Because someone mentioned if somebody takes a bicycle from someone else, is he engaging in aggression or not? And you have to know who the bicycle owner is before you can determine whether it's theft or repossession of private property. And then I was going to say that private property is based on homesteading and legitimate title transfers such as gifts, barter, trade, things like that. And then I was going to go over a whole bunch of misunderstandings of misunderstandings of libertarianism, among which is that it's incompatible with religion. Another one is that it's incompatible with politics. Another one is that it's incompatible with getting something for nothing. Some people say that's no good. Even war. There's nothing wrong with war, per se. We're not pacifists. Libertarians are not pacifists. If you punch me, I don't have to turn the other cheek. I can try to prevent you from punching me. There were some legitimate wars on the defensive side. War of Southern Secession. The War of Secession from England in whenever it was, the 18th century. There's nothing wrong per se with war. Now, war is not nice, but if somebody else is attacking you and you just sort of, spread your legs and whatever, that's not good. That's not libertarianism. I was also going to discuss tenure, healthcare, spanking kids. I tell you, Stefan has a girl. Girls are nice. I have a boy and a girl, and they're very different. My boy just wanted to go out in traffic. I mean, I had to spank him to make sure he didn't go out in the traffic. There's nothing wrong with spanking per se of little kids. I'm not talking about child abuse. Law, socialism, collectivism, I've already discussed. I was going to talk about, could a libertarian be a concentration camp guard? If he saved people for the purposes of saving people, I was going to talk about unions, abortion, namely apply libertarianism to a whole bunch of interesting and challenging topics. But the host, Jayon, came up to me right before I spoke, and right before